Hey Chris, thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Happy to be on.
I'm going to ask you a question. What is it that you can advise someone who is getting into political science? What do you think they should do before they get into government relations?
It's a good question. I think I always like to touch on my experiences when asking these kinds of things because coming from my background, at least, obviously, I didn't have much in it when I first got into this. So I think, as a first generation person and, undergraduate, now graduate degree, and now into all the fancy titles and fun things I get to do now. Coming from that kind of background, I think the best way that I try to put it when I explain it to people that ask me that question or try to talk to people that are at a different stage in their career or starting to get started in this kind of thing is having to really kind of reset your mind into saying that you have to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. You have to put yourself out there 110%. And touching on that experience, I think for myself, when I was first looking to get into this, what I really tried to do was just try to put myself out there as much as possible. And I know that sounds a little general or cliche in some sense, but to be honest, what it really just kind of meant was showing up, was it sending out all my information, resume, whatever I had to really put on paper in any sense, more or less trying to get involved in anything professionally, was to get it in front of as many people, get my face in front of as many people as possible, meet as many people as I could. And I can just remember from the earliest stages, I saw something about getting involved with the state party here in North Carolina as a freshman at NC State. And I was like, that sounds like a great opportunity. Had no idea what I was doing, was, not at all qualified, I think, really at that point to do it. But I just threw the one suit on I had every day and showed up there as much as I could between class. I didn't even have my car with me, and thankfully it was close by. And I just went there as often as I could to show my face, to be helpful, to be a fly on the wall, to be a sponge and soak everything in. And then just really kind of get my brain around, okay, what's my next step? What do I need from here? What do they need from me? And, you could just use things as a stepping stone from there, because you'd be surprised at how simple things and easy things come your direction sometimes if you really just focus on being involved and being there, and offering what you can at that time. It's amazing sometimes how the world is such a small place and how things can kind of connect if you just treat people the right way and don't burn bridges and keep doors as open as possible.
Hmm. And were you like this since childhood or something changed in between?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think my parents would probably have a different perspective on that than me, and maybe some people that have known me a long time. I mean, I don't. I mean, I think I've always had the ambition to be involved politically. I can remember in fourth grade. So I moved here in 2005. So yeah, I was right at the end of third grade, beginning of fourth grade. We moved from New Jersey, my parents and my brother, my younger brother, and my younger sister, and I wanted to run for school, for class president in elementary school. And so I had this whole idea in my head that I wanted to run for class president. The only issue I really had is I didn't know anybody, because I just got there. And so, there's really not much of a platform or that much of a priority list agenda wise, or, anything you could kind of put in fourth and fifth graders' faces to say, I'm going to make a difference here at this school, Pleasant Union Elementary School. But, I did it. And honestly, what I really, when I say I mean my parents were more of like, this is what he wants to do. This is what he likes. Let's try to see what we could do. So we had all slogans, we had things printed, different flyers to hand out, mail. It seems like almost mailers that we see like today in campaigns, things stuck all over the walls. I adopted the JFK slogan. I was like, ask not what your school could do for you, ask what you could do for your school. Like I had a whole thing going. And so I don't know, maybe if some of that some of that I do now stems from that, but I've always considered myself an extrovert, in some sense, and I've never been, the more I've gotten into things and the more I've, met folks and gotten involved in what I do now, or, anything that's really kind of accumulated as a part of it, it's being in unfamiliar, uncomfortable territory for me is, not anything new. So, having to meet folks and, earn trust and credibility, try to garner respect in any sense, treating people correctly and trying to be as professional as you can. It doesn't mean you can't, slide in jokes there and be sarcastic like I like to be. But I think, I don't know, maybe that stems from that, but I don't think anybody at all will say at, 27, I was the same person I was when I was 5, 10, or whatever the case may be. I just think as I got older, I started to kind of understand a little bit about, what I kind of needed to do to get to do what I want to do one day. My parents have always been fundamental, building blocks and trying to instill a lot of, their values and how they view the world and how they view people, and trying to make me understand that, treating people the right way and trying to do it, from that ground up type way, I guess would be the way to put it, is kind of the right approach to have for pretty much everything. You can only figure out what you want to do by figuring out what you don't want to do, and just trying to be involved and get involved as much as you can.
Mm. New Jersey, I think that's where you get your cool swag from. I guess that makes sense.
I don't know, man. There's a there's a couple chains underneath this suit here, so but it's I think it just depends. Jersey's a great place. Obviously, I grew up here in North Carolina. Jersey's just kind of a fun geographical fun fact of where I was technically born. But I've made who I am here, and went to school here, did the whole thing here. So sometimes I got to throw a twang on depending on who I'm talking to. Don't let me fool you. We all got to be chameleons sometimes. So
That's awesome. And do you feel like having that outgoing personality is important or key to this profession?
I think so. I mean, and I don't want to say it as like, oh, it's worked for me. It has to work for everybody. And I don't even think, worked is even the right word at this point. I think being able to, again, talk to folks is important, and communication is important. And what I've kind of learned through this role is what I take off of from my past is that, being able to connect with people at a level, it's just obviously it depends on who you're talking to, but being able to really have your words resonate obviously is important. And I think you have that. Sometimes people say less is more. And I do agree in a certain sense that there's, situations where it calls for you to be, not at the forefront of every conversation and not dominating every topic. And sometimes, trying not to be the smartest person in the room, because it doesn't often really lead too many friends your direction when you're dictating that. But I think being able to just walk in and speak with folks, really kind of understand that, you're talking to a person. And when you're talking to a person, people want to feel like their words and they're valued, their time is valued. And sometimes that leads you to talking about nothing for 20 minutes, and that's okay. I mean, I like to obviously try to connect with folks and really help them understand that I do care about them, which is why I'm there. And I think that calls for that in this position as well, too, is as much as everybody has a job to do, we have to treat each other a certain way, and we have to actually care about the folks that we're interacting with sometimes on a daily basis. So the extrovert or the outgoing personality, I think to a certain extent is, necessary at certain points. But I think, you can see good and bad examples of that everywhere. Some people don't shut up, maybe of being a hypocrite. I don't know. But it's more of a situation where, you can kind of try to find the right words sometimes, or the right type of way of speaking to folks and helping them really kind of level with people. And it's something that, I've had to do in different capacities now, whether it be through, advocacy stuff in law school, and now as an attorney, obviously having to kind of put things a little bit more in layman's terms to help folks understand stuff. God knows I need layman's terms as well, too. And then even through the policy work that we have to work on too, it's, experts are experts and they're good at their job, but there's also people that have to go and explain the expertise sometimes, and I think sometimes that's where I come in.
Nice. And has anything surprised you, like as far as your job goes? When you got into this, did anything surprise you, or was it as expected?
Yeah, I think everything's surprising. It's, I've never really ever totally 100% known what I knew what I was walking into. I think having kind of an open mind is the best, and you will absolutely be surprised. I think, when I was working as a staffer in that building, which I hold very near and dear to my heart, there's a lot of things that are surprising. Things that sound so simple as, I'm just a bill, we all remember that. I mean, things are not that simple. So it's surprising sometimes how, things come to be, or why things are at the forefront of conversations, or, how certain things get done or don't get done. I mean, there's a lot more to every story. And I think what was surprising to me is the amount of input and people that are involved in maybe something that is so small in the grand scheme of the world that we live in. And you would just think like, oh man, this is 3 sentences. Like, why would, this many people care about it? And you're like, well, this is actually the input of hundreds, if not thousands of people. And you're like, oh man, okay. Yeah, no, this is not just some small thing.
Yeah.
That's why everybody in the government relations thing, it's like, I just have a small bill. It's a minor bill. It's a, non-controversial bill. And it's like, I wish things were that simple in our world, but anything that's worth doing, there's always going to be some, some input and some, some opinions on it, I guess. So, what was surprising to me is, again, just how straightforward a process could be on paper, but practically how different it actually is.
And what is the hardest part about your job?
I think the hardest part about my job is, I think it's one, how much pressure I put on myself, because I try to hold myself to a certain internal standard. And, that's kind of hard to live up to. And that's just me speaking from the heart openly about, that aspect of things is, you have to balance a lot of people. You have to balance a lot of personalities. You have to balance your own as well on top of it. Like I said, you have to kind of be very self-aware. You have to be transparent. And I think the hardest part is trying to have to think about the long-term versus short-term in anything that you do. Is, what, you have a job to do, and everybody does. And you have to think about what are the long-term and, short-term consequences, good or bad, in anything that you're trying to do. And, it's a difficult, thing to grasp and tackle sometimes of, if I really want to get this done, what's the cost of that? And, I don't want to ruin a relationship or burn a bridge or, maybe make somebody upset unnecessarily. But I also, just like anybody else, we have, things to do. We have to get them done. And, it's a hard thing to kind of wrangle with sometimes. But, personalities, again, too, as you work in politics, so you have a lot of people. You have to deal with a lot of people. You have to know a lot of, keep up with their titles. It's an ever-changing industry, I say, of turnover of people that might be looking to go somewhere else, and they go somewhere else, and they're not in the same roles they were before, but you still have them saved in your phone as 3 positions ago. And I was probably no different than that when I was going through transitions from things from school to jobs and stuff too. So that, keeping up with that too, and then work-life balance, I think, like anybody, is that as well. As when you're in a job that requires you to speak with folks, you have to kind of be a little bit more selfish. I'm starting to learn with your time to a certain extent. But then you also have to think about the fact that, if you're in a position in life that you're able to do those types of things to, make more time for folks than people with, families, the people that live further away, people that have a lot of other obligations. It's more of a luxury, if you look at it that way, sometimes too, to be able to have, the leeway and the time to do that kind of thing. So, all of those things in a roundabout sense.
Okay, cool. Let's dig a little bit into your personality. So what is the one thing you like to share, which very few people know about you?
Oh, wow. Okay, let me think on that for a second. Very few people know about me. Okay. I always, I think maybe this is one of them. I'm actually a Chinese studies minor. So for 4 years when I was at NC State, I actually studied each and every semester I was there. I studied simplified Mandarin. So for 3 days a week, I would go in a class of about, I think it was about 8 people, sometimes 10 max, depending on the semester. I would go, and from the very beginning, I started at 101 like everybody else. And I would, we'd go in there and do reading. We do a little bit of writing. I'd have a separate workshop once a week for writing. So it was sometimes 3, if not 4 days a week that I got to do that. So that was, that kind of opened my eyes into something completely new. Like I said, as somebody that isn't afraid of trying new things because of, just how things have gone throughout time. I jumped into it with 2 feet when I first got there as kind of a cool opportunity. Had the opportunity to study abroad, which unfortunately I wasn't ever able to go do because of just the pursuit of some of the other things I was doing in this world and trying to make sure I had my summers filled up with productive, career things. But yeah, no, I studied it for 4 years, got pretty good at it at a certain point. Please don't test me live now about whether or not I get things correct. But, I always said it was a funny joke because I studied Chinese for 4 years, and then I went to law school for 4 years, and I think Chinese was more understandable. But it's a cool thing. I like to, not many people, I guess, expect it talking to me, but it's challenging myself is something I've never been afraid to do. And having the opportunity to do that was humbling at certain points, but it was also extremely rewarding as that, kind of finished up. And I haven't used it too much now. I don't think me going into the General Assembly speaking Chinese is going to help me or anyone. Yeah, close to the test.
That's awesome. And what is your favorite hobby?
Ooh, my favorite hobby. I love sports. I've always loved sports. Played them growing up a lot. Played football, baseball, hockey. Even when we first moved to North Carolina, had to kind of drop that one just because of a lot of other sports that I wanted to play. But I'm a diehard hockey fan. Love it more than probably most other things. But I love my family are big hockey fans. We're big New York Rangers fans. So what I really like to do is at least once a year, I like to try to go with my younger brother, Greg. He's 3 years younger than me. He's just as much of a diehard crazy fan as I am. We like to pick at least one game a year where him and I will go and go watch a game together at Madison Square Garden in New York City. Been able to thankfully be able to do that a little bit more here recently in the last few years. COVID kind of was, a little bit of an issue with that. But even when we can't go, I love to watch the games with him as much as possible. He's in Winston-Salem now, so I don't get to do it too often anymore. But on Sundays, all my family, we meet up for Sunday dinner back in Wake Forest. So I like Sunday dinner. It's a great hobby to be able to go see everybody once a week. But if I get that plus a Rangers hockey game, that's kind of great for me.
Awesome. That's very cool. If you could have dinner with any three people dead or alive, who would they be?
Oh man. Oh man. I think I probably have to go presidents on this. I think if I had to pick, I'd go three presidents just because I'm a little bit of a history buff. So one of my favorite presidents ever, like I think I had said before, is John F. Kennedy. I just something about being a young president that was, the first, the youngest at the time, and Catholic from up north, I kind of resonate with that a little bit. I think Reagan would also be a great one, and then FDR maybe too. Maybe be my three. That'd be a really interesting policy discussion throughout history with three of those presidents. But I think all three of them obviously lived through some very trying times and very historical moments. So I think there'd be a lot for me to just kind of sit up and soak in. But then if I had to go hockey, I mean, I could pick sports guys all day. Like I could pick like Mark Messier, Wayne Gretzky, and give me one of the guys on the team now. I'd be thrilled. I got to go do that at the. They have a casino night for the Rangers. We went last year, my brother and I. We got to meet like all the team. It was all for the Garden of Dreams Foundation, and I got to meet every player. And I was like, didn't get to sit down and eat dinner with them as I would in this scenario. But I was like, you're 26. You're not going to freak out when you meet another guy that is near your age or older at this point. Be mature. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, no problem. And I got to go shake one of the players' hands and introduce myself. And I was like, I love you so much. I'm like, oh, that was weird. Yeah, that was weird. I just. So I'll go with those three if I had to go the presidential political route, just because of their significance in history, and there'd be plenty to talk about. But if I had to go sports, I could pick my own three there too.
That's awesome. So going a little bit back into your childhood, you did give us a sneak peek into it, but can you tell us in a brief couple of sentences as to how, what was your childhood like, growing up? Were you always imagining yourself to be an entrepreneur like your dad, or did you want to be, running your own shop? What was your thinking back then?
Yeah, I think, having my parents, both of them, honestly, as a role model made, things a lot easier than people would realize, as much as you can talk about the first generation stuff. I think, I always obviously looked up to my dad in the entrepreneurial sense and knew that was something that I knew would be a part of my life. But he also instilled, my brother and my sister and I at a very early age, is that, he does the things he does to provide the opportunities for us to do more. And I think that, that kind of resonated for me at a very early age. So, I got interested in politics, got interested in law, tried to figure out the best path to be able to do that. And thankfully, my parents were, as supportive as, you could ask for, and more than that, honestly, to allow for me to be able to do those types of things, and sacrificed a lot to make sure that those happened. And, being able, allowing me to be able to go up to DC was a huge experience that they sunk a lot of time and investment into to make sure that happened for me to, continue this kind of career path. So it's one very specific example that I can think of that sticks out for that. But it's not, there was never any hesitation to try to, to not do what my dad did, and or continues still to do. He amazes us every day, and my mom the same. But they're having both of them kind of at your back does make you feel like you can do pretty much anything, and continue to have that from them as I go down this path too. So I'm very thankful.
Nice. And what is the most favorite issue you worked on?
Oh man, I think one of the more favorite issues, or I think the favorite one that sticks out for me, I'd have to again go back to when I was a staffer. So I worked with State Senator Brent Jackson's office for a number of years. Actually, when I first got into law school as well too, which was a part-time situation for me in law school and a full-time in his office. And we worked on a very particular issue in revolving around special needs children, and kind of some administrative red tape issues along throughout that process for making sure that those kids and those families were able to get the educational opportunities and the support that they need in different capacities within public schools. And it was a very constituent-driven issue that came across a connection that I had with a really close friend of mine and his son. And it kind of was one of those things that I just kind of mentioned to him through a brief meeting. And next thing you know, he was all on top of it because of the person that he is, knowing that there was, this particular, especially subset of North Carolina population that needed this assistance. And he immediately was all over it. And I got to work very closely with, DPI and some other folks on how that would look. But it became a very sensitive down-home issue. And I'll never forget when we got it done at the end of session, the family that I had spoken to originally were outside the Senate chamber as it got voted on. They came up and gave me a big hug and, told me it meant more to be able to fix this process, to make it more beneficial and easier for these families, even though it didn't directly affect them anymore, just to know that their network of folks that they work closely with special needs children as well in that area wouldn't have to go through what they went through as a result of it. So that was probably for me one of the biggest things I was able to do.
Nice.
I don't take credit for it by any means.
Yeah, that's okay. That's good. And at Kairos Government Affairs, tell us what your role here is, and what are the kind of clients you look for?
Yeah. I'm the General Counsel here at Kairos Government Affairs. It is myself, our managing partner, Betsy McCorkle, our partner, Scott Lassiter, and Brittany Conrad, who is the most important person in our office, who makes sure we're doing what we're doing when we should be doing it. We work with a lot of different folks. We take on a lot of issues, particularly in a lot of different subsections of the North Carolina legislative discussions that we see every year in both the long and short sessions. So we work with folks in the transportation space, the energy space. We work with folks in the healthcare space. So we really cover a pretty broad range of topics just based on the history and the experience of a lot of the folks that work here, and being able to kind of leverage a lot of those relationships and connections to make sure that, our clients are able to, work on what they need to here throughout the state. When we're looking for clients, what we really kind of look for is folks that are rational and level-headed. I think everybody obviously gets very vested in what they're talking about, as they should. But I think, being able to trust us, to defer to us on a certain sense of the everyday, to trust us to make sure that we're doing our job and best advocating for them at the legislature, at the agency level, whatever we, may be tasked with, and communicated with us as well, too. I mean, we're only as effective as the people we work with, especially. So being able to keep open and, informal lines of communication open and being responsive and, trusting our judgment in certain respects, in certain situations, and then also having a good, respectable decorum with members, and being able to be presentable and level-headed, like I said, even if things aren't necessarily going the direction they want them to in certain specific instances. All of those things is what we really value here. And then I tell folks that we work with is that our reputation and credibility is just as reflective on us as it is you, and vice versa, is that we try to be as respectful and credible as we can, and we try to make sure that when we're working on your things that we do the same, and make sure that you also get that same type of opinion, I think, hopefully through the folks that we work with. So we hold it near and dear to our heart. So like I said, we try not to burn bridges. I at least try not to, of course. And, we've been thankful to be very successful and being able to advocate it for our clients here. And, thankfully been able to do a lot of good work too.
Nice. And looking towards the future, what's your aspiration and what really drives and motivates you?
I mean, what really drives and motivates me is to continue to kind of just build off of everything that I've been able to do. I'm the type of person that loves to grow each day. If I can, I love to try to be able to explore new things as much as I can. Obviously, being a newly licensed attorney now has kind of been a new spin on things for this within this job as well too. So I'm constantly learning, and I'm the only attorney here, so that's great. I'm also right and wrong at the exact same time. It's fantastic. I really hope, obviously, to aspire to be involved in politics greater one day. I think, obviously, being able to understand the process and the people that work in the state is just as critical as having the ideas to try to implement them. And institutional knowledge and really being able to understand how things work, I think, is critical in being effective in any capacity. So I'm hoping, honestly, to use as much as I can within this role and the roles in the future to be able to continue to work on behalf of North Carolinians the best I can and advocate for good policies and hopefully work to implement them one day.
Chris, thanks so much for spending these 20 to 30 minutes with me. I'm sure a lot of people would have learned a lot about you and also what are the do's and don'ts about lobbying as well. Thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.